One of the hardest types of criminals to treat from a behavioral or psychological perspective are those that commit financial fraud crimes. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones, and I've worked in the criminal justice system for several years treating criminal offenders. And, you know, I've worked you know, in a setting where I've treated those that have been on pretrial, probation, in prison, and so on and so forth. And one of the things that I've always noticed is that people who commit crimes around financial fraud, they're usually the most difficult to treat from a behavioral perspective because a lot of times this is something that happens over time with their families, intergenerationally. That's what I'm trying to say. So essentially what I'm trying to say before I got so tongue-tied is that a lot of times what you see this sort of passed down in their family. So if a person is committing financial fraud, a lot of times their mama did it, their grandmama did it, or, so on and so forth. And not always the case, but in most cases, I see that it's a norm within the family. It's like a culture that's understood within the family. And then not only that, but there's also this reinforcement that they get from families, so I've worked across cultures. So I've worked with Middle Eastern cultures, I've worked with Asian, black, white, you name it. I've worked with people that have committed high profile crimes and this type of stuff. And what I've noticed is that these people get like reinforcement from their family. They get this validation. So especially with women a lot of times get approval from their mothers or grandmothers, or women that they highly value, but they get that like limited approval, that limited love, and that limited affection. Like, for example, if they steal for their mother, right? If their mother wants something, or if their mother needs money to bankroll her lifestyle, women will often do it to get that love and that affection and that closeness from their in that relationship with their mother. And I actually, again, I did a research study as part of my dissertation on black women who were psychologically abused by their mothers while growing up, or by their parents while growing up. And I think one or two of my participants in there, from what I can recall, talked about experiencing that from their mom, and how there was always like this, their mother was always like wanting or needing something, and in order to like sustain that relationship with their mothers, they had to do it. And there's a part of it that they like the status and stuff too, and just the financial like freedom or whatever it is that they get from it too. But for the majority of the women that I've worked with over time, they keep doing it to stay in those relationship cycles, or to stay as part of a family unit. Now, the men that I've worked with that have done it want to have that lifestyle specifically. So they want everything that comes with. So they want the women, the sex, the parties, and just the lifestyle that comes with it. They also like how it makes them look within a family, and they're essentially trying to keep up with the Joneses. In my experience, this is very popular in Middle Eastern culture. So in places like Dubai and things like that, where, and I love Middle Eastern culture, so this isn't meant to be a put down, but in cultures where like materialism is viewed as like a core value, and things like that. So men will oftentimes continue doing it. And their families may not know it, and a lot of times when their families find out about it, it creates this huge source of shame, but they still want that flashy lifestyle, whereas women are doing it to try and belong in a lot of cases. Today must be a heavy plane day. But essentially, I've worked with people, even when they're out on like bond, or they're like awaiting trial and things like that, that they'll get caught up in another scheme a lot of times, a lot of them are still, doing that stuff. They're still they're still committing that financial fraud, and it's hard for them to stop because of the reinforcement that they're getting from it, and to keep up that lifestyle. And in a lot of cases, they end up having to do huge amounts of time because of it. But again, there's high recidivism rate. Very, very high recidivism rate. And even if they're not going back to prison or getting caught up, I still think, from my experience, there's a large likelihood that they're still committing financial fraud on a certain level in some way, just because it's so hard to stop and so hard to give up that lifestyle and everything that comes with it. And again, in women's cases, to let go of those relationships that give them that breadcrumb of love for those few minutes that they're able to give them money. I think this is something that just keeping in mind with what's happening on a national level. When we're talking about financial fraud, or when we're talking about dismantling things, and people have access to so many people's money, just keep in mind that a lot of times when people get that access to finances, when they get that high from that fraud, they become even more grandiose, even more entitled to have access to finances. And so very seldom do I see people just give up. I don't think I've ever in my professional career seen people just be able to give up committing financial fraud, or give up stealing, in that way. And where they're like, if there's credit card scams, or if there's just like outright taking someone's money, I don't know that I've ever seen that in my professional career, despite, I don't care how many interventions there are, CBT, DBT, blah, blah, blah. It's just, that reinforcement is there, and people's brain, they naturally click. Plus, if their personality typology is one in where they feel entitled, their ego gets inflated once they've committed something and think that they've gotten away with it. They're going to do it even more. But even when the risk is high, they know that they're under the spotlight. They know that there's a target on their back. They're even going through their own criminal cases. A lot of times people will risk it all just to get that even again and get into even more trouble. So that's just, just something that I've thought of that unfortunately happens to a lot of people, that they try to do it now, and scams and schemes are becoming so common now, especially with credit cards and all this other kind of stuff. But even politically, we're hearing about some things. So just know that the risk is high, and that, when people feel like they want to try to find some sort of way to get their hands on money that they feel entitled to, that you're in danger of that. So just something to keep in mind.